I have shot this like 4 times because number one, I'm new at this obviously. And number two, the first time I did it, I was in my Airbnb still, and I am back home now, which is fine and great and everything. The only issue is that my home is in complete disarray, and we have fewer kind of like spaces to be in than we normally do, and so my kids are just everywhere and they're being children. And also I'm at the stage of making videos where I'm a little bit embarrassed, I guess, to like record them in front of my partner, and so it's like I want everybody not in my space at the same time so that I can think. And then finally, in the last like several clips that I recorded, my hair was doing this thing. It was like this piece here was like doing like that. It looked like that, you know? And I'm okay with like intentional messiness, but I'm not okay with unintentional, I didn't plan for it messiness. And so naturally I'm redoing everything because I can't have that. If you've never read classics, or if you're a little bit nervous to get into them, a little bit intimidated, I have a few ideas for some things that I think you could start with that could make your experience better and more enjoyable, and could potentially make you want to read more classics if that's something that interests you. And so this video is the 5 classics or modern classics that I recommend if you are trying to get into this particular genre. Okay, so the first on my list is going to be The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgkin Burnett. And this book, so this author has a special place in my heart because I think I mentioned this, but the first book that I read independently was The Secret Garden. And I was on my leapfrog, and I had a really good time reading it because it talks about the magic of the world and what happens when you try and see somebody for more than who they seem to be and for more than who they present themselves to be. In this case, like a bratty little, you know, entitled like little piece of crap. That's just that's what it was giving. But and I think that being taught early to look for something deeper in people was really important for me and really valuable for me. And so I'm gonna read you a quick quote. Sorry, this is Mary Lennox, who is our main character, our protagonist, and she's speaking here. And she says, "I'm sure there is magic in everything, only we have not sense enough to get hold of it and make it do things for us." And there's a lot more than I can say here, like in this moment, because context is needed for this book, obviously, like most stories. But I really liked the idea that magic was something that we not just looked for in our experiences, but also, you know, tried to make work for us. Meaning, I don't know, just something that we tried to make work for us, something that we first had to notice in order to make work for us. And so I think that seeing magic in something as mundane as like a garden or the relationship between cousins, like recognizing that kind of magic requires somebody to slow down and really take stock of what's around them. And I'm glad that the first sort of magic I was introduced to independently was so tame, because I still have that appreciation for those kinds of little things and those little moments right now. In a lot of the books that I read, like, I'm really into seeing a character develop, and that's more important to me than the story. And, you know, I don't know if everybody sees literature or art in that way, but I like to see a person's development or a character's development. And so this was a really good experience for me, and it opened up the world of magic later on for me. And I had a greater appreciation for when I saw like literal magic in like Charlie Bone and in the Chronicles of Narnia and etc. later. But it started really for me with the secret garden and the magic of flowers and the magic of just possibility. And so the second book I want to recommend, this is a modern classic, is Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. And I can't quote this book because it's too hard, because I want to say everything. I want to read every single thing that I can. And so instead I'm going to just say the funeral scene. The funeral scene. There is a funeral scene, without spoiling, that takes place where, how do I explain this? So you've got a few characters that I guess I should tell you about so that I can properly explain this. But Milkman Dead the Third, I believe, is our protagonist, and you kind of get to see his life develop, his entire life develop. And the other characters in the story sort of exist around him. And he sort of treats people as though they exist around him, meaning everybody exists in relation to him, as opposed to everybody having their own independent life and story that they're living. And he kind of goes through a bit of a rude awakening, learning and discovering that, and having, you know, people call him out for that. And it's really interesting. One of the other characters in the story is his aunt Pilate. And Pilate, the biblical spelling, so Pilate. And this is obviously, you know, like there's a metaphor happening here. But there's something about the naming conventions that Toni Morrison takes part in where, like, every name has a meaning, you know, like every name means something significant, and lineage is also really important, especially in this novel, because again, this is Macon Dead the Third. Pilate carries her name, it's written down, and she carries it around in a little like box that she's attached to her ear as an earring. And there are a couple of quotes about what it means to give somebody your name, what it means to have a name. But the funeral scene specifically, Pilate, I won't tell you who has died, but Pilate is having a sort of call and response lament with another character, and the two of them are grieving over this lost person, who in part is lost due to Macon Dead the Third, the protagonist. In large part, it's his fault. And I don't know if it's the lament itself, and in the community that my mother grew up in, lamenting during a funeral, like how would we call it? We would call it, I'm feeling not very connected to my culture right now, but there's a word for the lament, a funeral lament, in my culture, on my mom's side of the family. And it's very normal to have these cries, these outcries. And but the words that are exchanged during this particular call and response are just like, they ruined my life. And I took a 3-month hiatus from Toni Morrison after reading this book before I could pick up. I just read her short story Recitative over the past weekend, and I couldn't pick it up until, like, I needed time. Just read it. Just read it. I can't quote anything from it. It just, maybe I'll change my mind later, but right now it just doesn't feel right. Okay, anywho, so my next recommendation is Little Women. And Little Women it's another kind of coming of age-ish story, and it's by Louisa May Alcott. And this is another one that I read as a child. I was older than when I read The Secret Garden. I was probably like, 12, 13, something like that. And this story takes place during the Civil War. It's about this family who lives in New England, and the father's off at war. The mother is doing what the women did to support the war during that time, to support how they could. And then you've got these 4 girls who are all related, and I have 3 sisters, and so, like, as a family of 4 girls who grew up on the East Coast, like, this novel felt almost more important in a way. I think, and my parents just really enjoyed the idea of there being 4 girls and us being 4 girls, and it was a whole thing. But I would say it's a little bit of a slower read, but it's not slow in a boring way to me. It's slow in a cozy way. Like, it's meandering and but I really enjoy it because, again, I'm more into seeing how a character is growing. And so anything that shows me that is more important to me than the storyline. But that isn't to say there isn't a story here. There's obviously a story. How many movies have been made about this? Like 3, 4? Anyways, there are a couple of quotes that I thought were cute. Okay. And maybe this is because I felt like the characters I related most to were Beth and Joe. And I just thought this was sweet. But this is, okay. There are many Beths in the world, shy and quiet, sitting in corners till needed, and living for others so cheerfully that no one sees the sacrifices till the little cricket on the hearth stops chirping, and the sweet sunshiny presence vanishes, leaving silence and shadow behind. As a kid, I had like this romantic idea about, I don't know, like death and darkness, but not in like a weird way. Not in a weird way. More in like there was something curious about it to me. It never felt like a final thing to me. It just felt like, I don't know how to describe it. But for example, so I have it in my head, like I would at times, like growing up in a Christian home, like our parents would tell us that we had relatives who would pass and then they would go to heaven and we'd be, you know, reunited with them for eternity. And so like for me, falling asleep thinking about the idea of eternity was normal. Thinking about how much time was eternity, like think about something that you can't measure and then see how soon you get lost in it. That's kind of how I felt about death. Like it's just like this thing that you can't fully fathom or can't fully grasp from like an intellectual perspective. And so it's just something that I thought about. And I don't know, maybe it's a bit morose, but I don't know, it's just something I thought about. And so Beth is a character who I pondered a lot, and then the response to her death from her sister is something that I thought about a lot. And I always felt a little connected to her in a way, and maybe that's like morbid, but I'm a bit of a morbid person. I think I've been that way my entire life. And so anywho, overshare, we love that for me. So then the last book that I want to include in my top 5 is The Color Purple by Alice Walker. And this one for me, I did not want to hurt myself, and so I didn't read this until college. And I know that that's a terrible excuse and I'm super embarrassed to even say that, but there is a particular like section of literature that I think is difficult to handle, like especially as a person of color, because you're from a particular community. You're just supposed to know how to fathom and deal with and contend with all of the things that are happening in these novels, which obviously to somebody like me are unspeakable, because why wouldn't they be? And for me, it was something that I couldn't do, or I wasn't ready to do, let's say. And I needed to be ready. I needed to be perfectly ready to get in there. And there were other things I read, of course. It's not as though I'd never read literature of this particular kind. However, I knew that The Color Purple, like, I needed to take my time with, and it took me a long time to read it. It took me a few months, and it was an experience, and I am so grateful. The other thing is the language is really accessible. I haven't talked about the language at all in any of these, but the language is really, really accessible. And I think that if you are somebody who, number one, wants to just have a little bit more information or a little bit more context for just some things, it's a great resource. But the other thing is, it actually is a beautiful read. Like, the lyricism in this thing is crazy. And I'll just read you a quote. It's going to be difficult to try and give you enough context, but I'll just read you a couple of these. I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. People think pleasing God is all God cares about. but any fool living in the world can see it always trying to please us back. Like, what? I think us here to wonder myself, to wonder, to ask, and that in wondering about the big things and asking about the big things, you learn about the little ones almost by accident. But you never know nothing more about the big things than you start out with. The more I wonder, the more I love. Everything want to be loved. Us sing and dance and holler, just trying to be loved. Oh, Celie, unbelief is a terrible thing, and so is the hurt we cause others unknowingly. It's just, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Just like that. Just like that. It's a great vibe. Okay. And now my honorable mentions, because I can't choose just one thing. I've got to choose all of the things. So the first honorable mention I have on here is The Bluest Eye by Queen Toni Morrison. And The Bluest Eye is her first novel, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm just like, what? How you just sneeze and that comes out your first try? Like, not to say that she didn't work very hard, because I know that she worked very hard, but it's just like, geez. And The Bluest Eye is an interesting one because it's about a little girl who thinks that she'd be beautiful if she had blue eyes, but she's super chocolatey, like she is dark skin. And I don't remember if it was in an interview or if it was in the introduction, because Toni Morrison wrote, is it the introduction or the preface? And she talks about how, I can't remember if it's in the book or if it's something that she talks about, but what I'm describing is where Toni Morrison speaks to how this little girl, I think it's an interview, would look ridiculous if she had blue eyes. I'm sorry, I gotta close my eyes and look all around when I'm trying to remember something. And anywho, so she goes through this whole thing about how ridiculous this already amazingly beautiful little girl would look if she had blue eyes, and why it's perfectly reasonable that she has, you know, very dark eyes, and why it makes sense and why it looks good on her and all these things. But there's something about the, how do I want to put it? Like, there's something about the premise for The Bluest Eye that just feels so familiar. I don't know about other people. I mean, I guess I do because I talk to people, but for me, I grew up in the Hudson Valley, which is, you know, an area in the northeast of the country and of the US. And while I had a pretty mixed like neighborhood experience, like the kids around me and stuff, where I went to school, which is where I spent most of my time, I was in like almost all white schools most of my like in school education. And you know, these are like what's being described in The Bluest Eye, like as far as like just feeling a little, you know, maybe alienated, or maybe just like strange just compared to other, you know, little girls around you. Like, that's so real. It's so real. And I just thought it was like the perfect book to read and to I don't know, to give language to the thing that I'm like messing up trying to explain right now. But anywho, that is my first recommendation. My second honorable mention is A Little Princess. And A Little Princess is also by Frances Hodgkin Burnett, who wrote The Secret Garden. I really love this book. I was reading it around the same time, a little after that I read The Secret Garden. And I just became quite attached to this character, this protagonist as well, Sarah Crewe. And again, it's children's literature, but it is so well written. The prose is really, really beautiful. I definitely recommend it if you're looking for some way to get into classic literature. The next one I have is Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. James Baldwin, like, if Toni Morrison is auntie, then James Baldwin, he is uncle. He's Unc. And Go Tell It on the Mountain is another recommendation I have to include in my honorable mentions, because I've read, this is the only novel that I've read, but I've read a lot of essays and I've watched a lot of interviews. And I love James Baldwin so much because he's just, well, I mean, he's he's just so, this is a thinking human. And I know that that's like, it sounds like a low bar, but like, it's not. Like, he's an incredible thinker. Like, he's an incredible thinker, like philosopher level, thought processes. And I can't. But this story itself is really, really good. It's, again, very, very accessible from a language perspective. It is fun to read. It's fun to experience. So it's fun to experience the protagonist, John, kind of learn about himself and, question his religion and try and be somebody who thinks about what's going on around him and who's not, in a position to any longer, like what happens when you, like, for him, what's happening is he's in a position where he can't take anybody's word for anything any longer. He has to experience things for himself. And, that experience can either solidify how he was taught, what he was taught about concerning like God and religion and just what it is to be a man, or that experience can dismantle everything he thought he knew. And I think that that's like a huge part of growing up for everybody, that everybody has to experience. And so I really enjoy it. And if you can't see, there's a theme here in that I'm really invested in a character study. I'm really invested in seeing what happens to people as they are tested, as their views and belief systems are tested. I want to know what changes for them and why those changes happen. And so Go Tell on a Mountain is a really, really fun one. The last one I'm going to recommend as an honorable mention is The House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is my favorite Nathaniel Hawthorne. It is, if you like kind of creepy, weird, like inanimate objects coming to life and having like a soul and a spirit and, having maybe a bit of agency, more agency than seemingly inanimate objects should. I find that really cool. If you're into, there's a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper. If you're into things like that, this might be for you. I personally don't like gore. That's not the kind of like scary I'm into, but I am into kind of suspense and thrillers and things like that. And this is definitely like a gothic horror, gothic thriller vibe. And if you're into that, I think you'd really, really like this. It's definitely gonna give you the creeps. It's definitely, I will say it's the most slow-paced book on this list, which is why I put it last, but it's really good. And it's the one book I would say is less like character driven. Like, it's character driven, but like the story is the house. And I haven't read it in a while, but I'm due for a reread. And so if you're into that, definitely I recommend. But anyway, so those are my top picks for classics and modern classics if you're looking to get into those for the first time. These are all beginner friendly. I think that I was the youngest. The most tough novel out of these is the Hawthorne, and I read it when I was like, I don't know, 17, something like that. Like, these aren't tough to get into. They require thinking. They require like a little bit of attention. They just require your attention. But if you're willing to give me your attention, you'll be fine. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and yeah, let me know what you think.